Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you tonight. My name is Sandra de Castro Buffington, and I'm the founding director of the Global Media Center for Social Impact. We call it Global Media Impact, or GMI for short. We're based at the Fielding School of Public Health, where we recognize the profound impact of storytelling on knowledge and behavior, and the power of television, movies, music, and new media to change our world. So GMI works with the entertainment industry to inspire storylines of social impact on topics such as mass incarceration, racial justice, immigration, LGBT and gender equality, public health, and the environment. In turn, viewers around the world are entertained, engaged, and empowered to take action on what matters to them. In my work prior to joining UCLA, I worked on over 565 different storylines on 91 TV shows across 35 networks. This is from 2009 to 2012. So why do writers work with us? They tell us they're not educators and they're not teachers. They don't even think about entertaining when they're writing their scripts. What they do care about is telling the most compelling stories they can. So we help them make their stories more compelling by making them realistic and accurate. So we connect writers to experts and real stories of real people, like the remarkable people we will meet here tonight. I'd like to thank GMI staff member Jenny Walton-Wetzel and our amazing interns for helping to organize this wonderful evening for us tonight. Tonight we will see the film The House I Live In, and we'll hear from an extraordinary panel of experts and insiders who will share their insights on mass incarceration and the failed war on drugs. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Scott Budnick. Scott is a fierce champion of children in need and a successful executive producer of many movies. Scott grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and graduated from Emory University with degrees in business and film. As executive vice president of Green Hat Films, Budnick executive produced many successful comedies, including the highest grossing R-rated comedies in history, The Hangover series. Outside of film, Budnick is an activist for children in need, a teacher, and on the advisory board of Inside Out Writers. He founded the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and we'll hear more about that tonight. For his work with youth in the criminal justice system, Governor Jerry Brown named Budnick California's Volunteer of the Year in 2012. Budnick is currently launching a new production company. So please join me in welcoming Scott Budnick.
I really appreciate you all coming out to see this film. I saw the film probably 2 years ago, and it blew my mind and troubled me, and I loved it, but I hated it. It was a lot of mixed emotions, but it's a film that everyone really should see. We started the drug war with President Richard Nixon, and over the 3 decades since Richard Nixon, we've spent $1 trillion on the drug war, and today there's more drugs. So it hasn't worked. It's a colossal waste of money. We've thrown a lot of people behind bars for not hurting anybody other than themselves. And I think you'll see it detailed in an incredibly brilliant and provocative way tonight in the film. I wish Eugene Jarecki, who directed it, was here to meet you guys today. He's in Europe, but he's an incredible filmmaker. He's an incredible champion. And after the film, I have some friends I want you to meet, people that have been working in this movement to end mass incarceration and end sending juveniles to prison for life, as well as some folks that have spent many years in prison. And in my mind, they are the experts. They know what needs to be fixed, and you'll be hearing from them as well. So due to the size of the crowd, which I actually prefer, I'm really happy that it's a more intimate group. Hopefully after the film, everyone can come up here, we can bring their chairs in and just have a more intimate discussion rather than us presenting to you. just have a much better conversation where we can get everybody's perspective, we can fire questions and try to come up with some solutions. So really excited for you guys to see the film. I will be in and out because I've seen the film no less than 100 times. And I'll see you guys right after. Thanks. Appreciate it.
You have to understand the war on drugs has never been about drugs.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse.
What will you do when someone offers you drugs?
We intend to end the drug menace and to eliminate this dark, evil enemy within.
Put them away where they belong.
3 strikes and you are out.
Somebody down the road said drugs are bad. Okay, there's no argument there. But think about where we are 30 years later.
I do what I have to do. I know how to survive. Yeah, I got some weed, too.
Don't let them run.
The war against drugs is heating up.
I think they should have wrote prison guard on my forehead when I was born because it just fits me.
I say he's a criminal. Let him go to prison.
I have a life and 30-year sentence.
20 years for drug trafficking. I have life without parole for 3 ounces of methamphetamine.
Of the 2,600 people I've sent to federal prison, I've seen 3 or 4 kingpins. We're incarcerated poor people who are drug addicts.
You're watching poor, uneducated people be fed into a machine like meat to make sausage.
Law enforcement agencies get rewarded in cash for the sheer numbers of drug arrests.
The money's ours now. That's my money now.
The scale is unbelievable.
Nobody jails their population at the rate that we do.
All sorts of people get a financial interest.
Taser gun manufacturers, healthcare providers, phone companies.
You build a bed, they fill the bed. And you'll get rich, and we'll get rich, and we'll all be rich together.
Engaged in a great experiment. What happens when you take large numbers of people, remove them from their neighborhoods, their families?
What y'all getting them for?
What does this do to the broader community?
The drug war is a Holocaust in slow motion.
This is a war on all Americans. I think people keep saying, well, that's about them. Well, no, it's about you.
I wanted to introduce you guys to some fantastic people. Rather than me try to tell you about them and read their bios, I will let them introduce themselves. So, Mike De La Rocha.
Use a mic.
Yeah, sure. Just for the camera.
Exactly. How are you? So I first want to say humbly thank you so much. I graduated from UCLA, and I owe my worldview, my belief in humanity to this campus. And I spent 5 years here, and so when I parked...
Is that the super senior? Is that what happened?
Super senior, total super senior. But I was calling my old roommate and my old girlfriend and everybody because I was having all these memories. And so I just want to say that what you're doing, being here, it's not a small act, it's a big act. The things we were able to do here on campus, whether it was build buildings or making sure we were more open to students that had similar backgrounds as the movie, UCLA is a big part of my heart. So I'm currently the Director of Strategic Partnerships for a statewide criminal justice organization called Californians for Safety and Justice. I'm also a musician, and so I'm at the intersection of arts, culture, and politics. And I believe, similar to this center, that it's really stories, not facts, that move public opinion, which always precedes policy change. I spent 10 years working on policy. My former boss is now a congressman, Congressman Tony Cardenas, and I spent about 10 years just solely doing criminal justice reform policy. So that's me.
Mr. Kevin Hagan.
Wow, where do I start? Well, I'll give you a little brief background. In 1978, I was one of the most highly recruited tailbacks out of Southern California. Of course, when I got in my 20s, I went to college. When I got in my 20s, I decided I wanted to hang out with the homeboys. So I went to help my homeboys, ended up killing a man. unfortunately, you know, it's probably one of the most tragic things that you can possibly do. And I never had a prior record or anything like that. I was never in trouble before. It's just something that happened. And I ended up spending 28 years on a 25 to life sentence in prison. I got credited for 33 and a half years. But the thing is, I've been out 3 years. I'm thriving, and I'm living life. And to me, to see the fresh faces, see you young people doing what you do, going to school, trying to make a difference, because I work with kids. I've been working with at-risk youth since 1986 at the different places I was at, and I'm still working with them. In fact, one of my kids I have with me now was one of the kids I used to mentor in YA when I first got out. So
tell them what YA is.
YA is Youth Authority, California Youth Authority. It's, I call it a mini prison. That's what it is, actually is. And you have a lot of kids in there. We were talking about disparity in sentencing. And I'll just throw this out there. Bobby in Westwood steals a car. Joey in South Central Los Angeles. Bobby gets community service. Bobby gets 5 years in Youth Authority. So we'll get back to that later on, because I can give you some background on how judges and DAs look at that type of stuff and geographically look at things. But I am very honored, and it is my pleasure to be here today.
And this is Julio Acosta.
Hi, good evening. I was born and raised here in LA, and this is my first time here at UCLA. I never really thought this place existed except on TV, you know. You see the games and the Bruins and the football team, but it's true, it's my first time here, and it's interesting to be here. I got out of prison March 5th of last year. I did 22 years, 7 months. So it's... How
many days?
I don't know. I don't know, but it's. I got out March 5th of last year, so it's been amazing. Just over almost a year ago, I was sitting in a prison cell in the desert, and there's no way in hell. I mean, just a few years ago, there's just no way in hell I would ever think in my wildest dreams that I'd be sitting in UCLA holding a microphone. You know, it's awesome. I think this movie, this documentary is, I don't know what to say. It's taken all my words away. Every bit of it is true. It's tragic. The worst thing for me in prison was seeing young guys, I mean kids really, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, who would come into the prison system that were non-violent, non-gang member, non-drug addicts, and they come into the system that would just turn them into all that, you know, tattooed face, heroin addict. I mean, I guess that's also a part of the war on drugs. You know, these prisons, California has 33 prisons, and I really thought that there would be no end to the construction of prisons. And I'm glad to see that things are changing. Laws can change. I think it's all about, what Scott has taught me is about the human connection. If it's one thing one person can do, is one person could tell their story to another person, and that helps change the laws. These laws are ink on paper. They're solid. I mean, they're as solid as the concrete and steel that prisons are made out of. But I do truly believe that things can change. That guy that has life without parole, I think maybe he can get out someday. I really do believe that. But it all starts with your voices and hopefully your and my actions and activities and all that up in Sacramento and in Washington, D.C. and wherever.
Thanks. Kevin, I was going to ask Julio, but he kind of touched on it. I mean, obviously, so much that you're seeing in there is, I'm sure, much more than all of us. There must be such a visceral reaction to remembering the time you spent in there and to see how others are sitting in prison, with many with very little hope. What was the impact of the movie as you were watching?
Well, you know, especially when they were giving these guys these long sentences for drugs. I was right in the middle when they closed down all the state facilities as far as the mental hospitals, and they changed them to developmental centers, and they took a lot of those people and they pushed them into prison. That's where they didn't belong. So it took a while before the system could come up to date to make sure those people had their medication and stuff like that. And I've always been a staunch advocate for the person who people, you know, they took advantage of. And we also in there, we fought for those guys to make sure they got their medication and stuff like that. But when I see these guys doing this long time, you know, I think back to how when I first fell, all the Christmases I missed, I lost my father, I lost my mother, I lost my grandparents, I lost many of my aunts, I lost cousins. And to see how, like I'll say for Julio, for instance, myself, how we were able to survive some of the things. I'm not saying I'm not going to ever say that I didn't belong here, because I did. And to this day, you know, I'll never forget what happened. But what I try to do is always move forward and pay it forward to somebody else, because I can't change the past. All I can do is live in the present. And I think it's very important that we see these people as human beings. And there's so much that went through my mind when I was watching this movie. I had to get up and walk on a couple of times. I got up and walked in the back because it was overwhelming. Some of the stuff that I saw and some of the things that we knew inside what was going on with the prison industrial complex. I mean, they're shoving people in there that don't belong. And it's about money. And that's what this is all about. But, you know, you live and learn and you try to make the best of what you have. You know, I've been able to meet great people like Scott here, you know, kind of took me under his wing, and some other people. And I always try to shine the best that I can possibly can as a human being. And, you know, and I have a job where I deal with homeless people all day. And, you know, like today, there was a guy, he was hungry. I fed him, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And, you know, and I see, and you know, I just can't stress enough for you young men and young women, be the best that you can be as a person. Don't let anybody take your glory from you. Don't ever put yourself in a position where that is taken away from you. And you know, your mom and dad's ride on your helmets. You know, they're going to ride you because they want the best for you. You know, we get to a certain age sometimes where we think we know it all, but we don't. I learn every day from young women and men like yourselves.
So I thought David Simon, who was the creator of The Wire, who spoke a lot in there, said something towards the end where the politicians are only going to be thinking about the next election and they're never going to be brave enough to do something about this, so it's on us. And I wanted to illustrate a little point about some legislation that we helped author and pass. And then I wanted to turn it over to Mike for him to tell you about something that he's currently doing to change the laws. But we saw, I'll give you kind of two very quick examples. We saw children, 14, 15, 16, who committed crimes getting sent to prison for life, being told you will die in prison. And we all know that 14, 15, 16-year-olds have a great capacity to change, so sending them to prison for life is basically telling them you have no ability to change, and that's wrong. And some older people, very disconnected people, might think that they have no ability to change, but working in the juvenile facilities for that long, I know they do. So there was a law called SB 9, which is a bill that was written, and this is before I became politically active, and it was a bill to end life without parole for juveniles in California. The bill sat in the legislature for 3 years, 2 votes short of passing. No Republicans, 12 Democrats who didn't want to look soft on crime wouldn't vote for the bill. 2 Jesuit priests came to me and asked me to come up with them. And I was in Sacramento, I was sitting at lunch, and an assemblyman ran in and said, the speaker wants to see you, the speaker wants to see you, and he was talking about the speaker of the assembly, and the assembly in Sacramento is where this bill was stalled. 2 votes. So I go into the speaker's office, and he has a photographer there. and he has 2 hangover posters. And I thought I was going to go there to talk about SB9, and I guess I was going to talk about The Hangover. But the speaker, even though he was interested in film, also knew why I was really there. And after 5 minutes of that, he said, let's talk about SB9. And I showed him the names of the 12 legislators. And he said, I want you to see these 3 and go to their offices now. I went to their offices. I gave them a lot of information that the woman who wrote the bill gave me. And in one day, we got the final 2 votes, and we were able to pass the bill. The governor had 30 days to sign it. It sat on his desk for 30 days. We had no clue what he was going to do, and on the last day, he signed it. And so now it's illegal in California to sentence kids to die in prison. Last year, that helped 325 kids in the system. But then we looked at the other 6,500 who were given life sentences but weren't considered life without parole. So if I give you 100 years in prison, you're still going to die there, but it's not called life without parole. So then we bit off a much bigger chunk of a bill called SB 260, which we helped write with Elizabeth Calvin of Human Rights Watch. But this time we were smart. We created a kind of a bipartisan whole feel at the way beginning. We got Mike and his organization involved at the way beginning. We brought Newt Gingrich in, Grover Norquist, a lot of very famous Republicans who are writing progressive stuff about criminal justice reform. We took these guys. We have 160 members in ARC who are all formerly incarcerated, and they go up to Sacramento looking like this, telling their stories, and you can imagine how those legislators are moved. We had a 60-year-old Republican woman who said, I've thought the same way for 60 years, but after I've met these guys, I realized I've been wrong the whole time, and then she voted for the bill. We needed 41 votes in the Assembly for SB 9. We got 41 votes. For SB 260, we got 52 votes. 9 Republicans came onto the bill. Governor got the bill, signed it on day 2. So now when we walk into prison, 6,500 people run up to us and thank us for giving them hope. Because before they were told they were going to die, and now they know they're going to get to hug their mother and sleep in their own bed one day if they transform their lives. And so now all of them are on a positive path. Mike De La Rocha, tell them a little bit about what you're working on with the ballot initiative.
First, as a passionate singer-songwriter, I can't just talk without acknowledging. I really appreciate you. I don't know who you are, but this movie strikes home to me, which is why I do this, so I understand where you're coming from. So, because when we talk about war on drugs or war on gangs, it's really war on people and our family members and loved ones. So, as much love as I can give you, I appreciate you. So, that being said, so working in politics, as you could tell in the movie, it's very difficult for politicians to do what's right. In California, the public is way further along than the elected officials are. And so last year we did a series of polling to see where the public was on sentencing reform. It's oftentimes easy to say, hey, I'm going to work with a youngster to make sure they don't get into the system, but then we forget about that same youngster when they're in the system. So we are running a statewide ballot initiative. It's actually called the Safe Neighborhoods and Schools Act. And what it's going to do, and it's November 4th is the election, so all of us here will be able to vote on it. It's going to be the most sweeping, transformative criminal justice initiative ever run in the United States. It's going to take 6 existing felonies, nonviolent, low-level, petty-level drugs, petty theft. So most people don't know in California that if you write a bad check under $950, that's a felony. And so within my own family, I have aunts that are working class and poor, so they'll write a check to feed my cousins knowing they don't have money in the bank, but that's a felony. Most people don't know that. Most people don't know receipt for stolen property, which means if you go to a swap meet and you want to buy a bike for your son.
I don't think these guys are going to swap meets.
Well, okay. Garage sale. No, check this. You go to Wasteland or somewhere else, and you buy a bike.
These are UCLA's
students. Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Kidding.
I love you all.
You go buy the most vintage thing you want at a store, and that bike or that nice jacket is stolen and you have no clue. and you get pulled over, that's a felony. So anyways, we're going to reclassify these into misdemeanors. Why? What does that do? Automatically, that means 10,000 people in state prison, 10,000 people in local jails are eligible for release because they're incarcerated on a felony that no longer exists.
Immediate release.
Immediate release. They're eligible for immediate release. The savings to California taxpayers is $1.5 billion in 5 years. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that salary savings and we're going to reappropriate it into a new fund that the legislature can't touch. That'll be for drug and mental health, substance abuse issues, victim services, and K through 12 education to deal with young people that are struggling with these conditions. But not the best. The part that really excites me on a personal level and a political level is we wrote the bill to be retroactive. And what that means is that conservatively speaking, 750,000 to 1 million people in California right now that have a felony will have a restart on their life November 5th. Meaning they can go get a job and not check out the box that says felony, meaning they could vote, meaning they can access Pell Grants and go to UCLA, meaning that they can get, housing and Section 8 if they need, meaning that they have a life. And so we can impact 1 million people overnight and redirect resources to do things that we know work, like treatment. And
as David Simon says, it's up to us. All of you guys, I'm sure, are eligible to vote on November 4th. So this is going to be something that everyone here can actually vote for. You can probably help them collect signatures. You could probably tell all your friends about it. You could help launch a campaign with Mike and his organization to get it on people's radars. And if we could turn out UCLA in a real way, that would be huge. And also, in the election, after this election in November, we're going to be writing a lot more legislation that's going to be going through the state capitol next year. So if any of you guys want to join us as we run around Sacramento talking to legislatures, come join the team and come run around with us.
Well, anybody who's interested can come to the Global Media Center at the Fielding School. And how many of you are in the Fielding School? Okay. Well, you'll know where to find us, 2214 Life Sciences Building. I want to, first of all, thank all of you for being here tonight. This has been already such a powerful evening, and I'm so moved by the stories. And I know, Julio, we're still going to hear from you, but you're all storytellers. And the movie, I think, was so powerful, not just because of the information it provided, but the way it was conveyed. And I found myself, how many of us here have not been personally impacted by drugs, addiction, or incarceration? Anybody in this room? I think everybody here has a story related to the stories we're hearing tonight. So I just want to acknowledge the power of that, and also really thank those of you here on the panel who are sharing personal stories, because that level of self-disclosure, to me, is more inspiring than anything I can think of. So thank you for all you do.
So before I turn it to you guys, and please ask any of us any questions, but specifically these guys, if you want to know anything about what they're up to. But quickly, I just wanted to talk about what's not reported in the media about folks that are in prison. Can you just talk a little bit about what your accomplishments were while you were inside?
Oh, wow. Well, I got my AA. I was in college before but I finished getting my AA there. I was 40 units short of my BA. Eventually I'll get there. I might be gray, white-haired, but...
Talk to Sandra. UCLA has an opening.
I headed quite a few different programs, but probably the most inspiring program for me was when we started the Round Table in San Quentin. It was a restorative justice program we started, and to see, we had, once a month we would meet with victims. That wasn't our victims, but they would come in. But I have to share this story with you. This one lady, she came in, she was angry. Her son had been killed at a party Pasadena. And he wasn't a gang member, but some gang members came in and they shot him and they killed him. So when she came in, she was mad at us. She was, why do you have this? Why do you have that? So I have a good friend of mine, Bobby Brown, God bless his soul. He passed away. Bobby tells her, he says, ma'am, we just want to be loved. And so another friend of mine, Jeff, and myself, we were talking to her during the whole time because we were sitting next to her. And she gets up out of her seat. I mean, this was a woman, she was giving guys the blues. She gets up out of her seat, she comes over and she gives him a hug and a kiss. And she became one of our best friends and one of our best advocates for us. And she would come in to different things. But that's one of my greater accomplishments, I feel, to be able to do that. But my passion is the kids. He was talking about some of the kids that had 100 years of life, kids that had 50 years. Two of my kids went. Omar was one of them. He had 100 years of life, young Hispanic kid. At the age 13, 14, 12, this is learned behavior. This is something that can be changed. Now, if you got a guy that's a career criminal, and this is all he's known all his life, and he's in his 30s and 40s and 50s, that's a different story. But this is a child. And my philosophy with these kids is we leave no one behind. Nobody left me behind. My family stayed with me the whole time. My friends that knew me before this happened, they stayed with me. They didn't let me flounder in there and just become part of the system. But I'm not going to say that it made me a better person. I'm going to say I grew up. It made me become a more insightful and wise person. Because I was a good person from the beginning. I wasn't a bad person. I was in a situation and things got out of hand. Of course, that's no excuse. It's still no excuse.
This is why my life's so much better now. Instead of being around people in Hollywood, I get to spend all day with these guys and learn so much. I met Julio in his last 3 years of incarceration. I didn't know him the first bit, but I started sending the young kids I was working with to Ironwood Prison. And when they first walked in, he would be the first person they saw, and he will tell you why.
In prison, there's a little system. And when a young kid comes into prison, especially with the Hispanics, Mexicans, the gangsters, the shot callers, basically will take this kid because this kid's going to be a soldier. So they'll take the kid and they'll indoctrinate him and they'll basically tell him this is what you got to do, these are the rules. The kid's scared to death, he doesn't know the rules, he doesn't know what to do. I mean, imagine being an 18, 19-year-old kid in prison. So what I would do is I would basically beat them to the kid, and I would let the kid know that, hey, basically you do have certain rights and you can say no if a guy asks you to hold his dope or his shank, you don't have to. I mean, there's a lot of predators in prison, and predators prey off of fear. They prey off of ignorance. They prey off of a kid thinking that he's all alone and there's nobody there to help him. So then I would go along with a team of other guys and we would get to these kids first and let them know, hey, you're not alone. You don't have to cave into these predators and you don't have to be afraid of these dudes, you know.
And instead of asking them, do you want to do drugs, what would you ask them?
Hey, do you want to go to school? You want to go to college? So that's what we would do. I mean, we would basically try to get these kids in college. If we have time, Scott said some of the things that you never hear about prison. Out in Ironwood, which is out in the Sahara Desert, out in Blythe, California, going towards Phoenix, there's a little community college called Palo Verde Community College. That community college teamed up with the prison, and you can get your AA degree, AA in liberal arts. They've graduated over 1,000 inmates, and of those inmates that paroled, I would say less than 1% have gone back to the prison system. So that's something you don't hear about.
And you have to think that the recidivism rate for 18 to 25-year-olds is 74%. So you get them to Ironwood, you get them in a supportive group of inmates, not a bunch of thugs, but you get them in a supportive group of inmates who are all trying to better their lives. You get them in college, their identity, they go in still thinking that they're clumsy from Barrio Loco. And then within 6 months, they start seeing themselves a little bit different than before they thought they never could do college and they never could pay attention when they were in school before, but now they're no pun intended, a captive audience, and there's nowhere to go and you can't be truant. And now you're sitting in class and wow, I can actually do this, and we start them off in the introduction to college class, and he picks all the easiest classes at first to give them some confidence, and then he starts ramping it up. He was the math tutor extraordinaire, and right now, I think about 400 people in the program, and we'll be going out there in next week. We're doing the first day of TED Talks in a California prison, and Richard Branson, the founder of Virgin's, flying out to kick it off. So it's going to be an incredible day. That's next Saturday on the yard where he graduated all these kids. So we've talked enough. Let's open up to you guys. All questions are acceptable. Don't censor yourselves. Let's have a conversation. So I'm putting down the microphone.
I love math.
I got a quick one. With those groups of inmates that you guys were like looking out, was that organized just you guys? Or was that somehow, like you guys just took that upon yourselves, like we're going to crew up and get to these kids, or was it somehow organized another way?
We always had a system in place where like guys look out for guys, you know what I mean? It's like if you know somebody and you like somebody, you kind of want to help them. So then people would come in, and let's say my cellmate was from Compton, right? So his little homie from Compton pulls up. He doesn't want the shot callers sending his homie on a mission. So then he would say, hey, Julio, can we get this guy into school? Like, yeah, let's get him into school. So then either I would go talk to him, he would go talk to him, and we would basically almost like claim that kid as one of ours. Like, hey, he's going to school, leave him alone. He's not one of the little F-up soldiers, right? When Scott came into the picture, it almost became formalized, because now we were getting almost busloads of kids, whereas before it was one or two.
But the prison was very involved. I mean, it worked here because there was a warden that really cared about the college program. There was a captain who ran the yard who cared really much. There was a counselor who proctored all the tests and quizzes and listened to the speeches for speech class and was really involved. So it took a team of staff and inmates working together to make it happen and to make it work really well.
It's a complex issue. There's so many different contributing factors, all interrelated. This messed up and tangled web. So that's established. But I just want to know, like, where do we start? Do we start with people currently in prison? Do we work on the programs in there? Do we work in terms of prevention with young kids before they enter the system? What about? I'm thinking, what about the people who aren't well, they are directly affected, but they're not incarcerated themselves, but the kids and partners of them. It's like, I get it, we have to approach it all. Everyone, at all angles, all levels, over the life course, but I'm just like, where do we start? And, yeah. If and I get it, there's not one angle to take. It's just overwhelming.
Okay, if we're going to start in the neighborhoods, we need to start at the elementary level. Because Julio can attest, I have some routes that are in some really bad neighborhoods. I mean, they're shooting and everything else. And these kids are exposed to this. But what I see LA is doing, they're making a lot of charter schools and academies are popping up, which I feel really good when I go through there and I see those kids dressed in uniforms and they're going to school and they're happy to go to school. But when you turn the corner and you go to Fremont High School and those kids are standing out there smoking blunts, then the pants are sagging. And you know where their head is at. But I talk to them too. When I'm at my stop, I talk to them too. Then if you want to go on to the next level, it's the money thing with the prison industrial complex. Julio, how much were we worth when we left per year?
Maybe like 54,000 a year?
Yeah, about 54,000 a year. That's taken away from the after-school programs, the elementary schools. I couldn't believe when they were cutting all these music programs and stuff like that. By the way, I'm a musician too. I play the drums. We need to get together.
There we go.
I can't believe how they have taken from the kids. We have failed. State and local government and nationwide has failed our kids worse now in this time than they did back in the days of the sweatshops and the Depression. Because these kids are out here, they don't have no place to go. So of course they're gonna look up to the big homie and they're gonna wanna be like the big homie, especially this guy here that hit it home for me right here. He didn't have anybody in his life, his father wasn't around. This is what he was exposed to. And then on the prison level, we get to the prison level, I'm gonna ask you a question. Would you rather have a guy that comes home who is a drug addict, drug addicted, continuously getting in trouble, who hasn't sought any help while he was locked up? Or would you rather have a guy come home and live next door to you that has gone through all these programs, has gotten an education? You know, and I understand about the societal, the sensationalizing that they do with crime and what they do and how they picture. I don't know if you remember the 3 strikes. When Arnold Schwarzenegger, the 3 strikes law was getting ready to pass in their favor, not in the state's favor, but the inmates, the convicts. What he did at the last 2 days, he took pictures of guys that were on death row, guys that were dead, and blasted the media with it. And everybody, oh my God, those guys, those are the guys. Half of those guys sitting in there on 3 strikes. That 3rd strike wasn't what they were supposed to send them to prison for. And a lot of them have gotten out now. But it all starts with the individuals, like Julio was saying. We always try to get guys and steer them down the other path. Because I was at a prison where San Quentin, Julio was in the desert, I was in the Bay Area. Bay Area is a lot more open-minded and liberal, I have to say. We had more brown card holders, volunteers in San Quentin than they did in the whole state of California prison system. We had Patton University, we had Berkeley professors, we had Stanford professors come in. We had programs from Man Alive for guys who had spousal abuse problems, anger management, drug and alcohol. We had the kid programs, and then we had programs for the younger guys that were there. They started their own little programs, and that was for them. So when the younger guys would come in there, they would take them under their wing. So I think it's something that it starts on all levels, but you always got to start in one place, concentrate in one place, and a lot of times, like we say, it rolls downhill from there.
So I was actually going to say, I think it's really important for me, like change starts from the inside out and working with you and your sphere of influence out. The other thing I want to say is something I don't want to lose from the film. The film was really talking a lot about the systemic issues, systemic racism. You can do as much after school, but there's a school to jail track that's just given. So that's why, like for me, sentencing reform is really important. The other thing I want to say is that any social movement, if you look at social movements around the world, specifically in America, they've always been driven by young people and by students, right? And so even let's talk about divestment from apartheid South Africa. That actually started on this campus. They started divesting, right? When we go to the economic issue, there could be a divestment of private, prisons that you guys could play a role in, right? So what I'm asking is for you to just continue to do what you do, which is dream big, right? Make no small plans. Think of what's the biggest thing and do that, because that's the thing that's going to push us. So the personal self-transformation is key in your own sphere of influence, but recognize the institutional barriers that are preventing people from having an opportunity to reach their highest potential, right? So.
And we also, Mike talked about the school to prison pipeline, but we're now together creating a prison into college and into university pipeline. And the Jesuit schools, Loyola Marymount, Santa Clara up north, University of San Francisco, they've created dozens of scholarships for folks coming out of prison who have already done college and can walk right onto campus and not let the financial barriers stop them. UCLA has not done that. USC has not done that. The Cal State and UC schools have not done that. So we can look at what the Jesuits are doing in terms of giving back and being there for the least fortunate. We can always argue and say, well, why should they get scholarships? They committed a crime, we didn't. But I think like Kevin said, who do you want coming home and being your neighbor? Like if this is really about taking someone that's broken and giving them all the tools to become incredibly successful, who cares that they're getting a scholarship? Because if you put them on that path to success, and I'm just talking a little bit with some Republican talking points right here, but think about the taxes they're going to pay once they start working for the rest of their life. Think about the families that they're going to raise the right way, not the way they might have been raised. Think about how many people will be affected by their positive transformation. Think of the people behind them, the brothers, the sisters, the nieces, the nephews, the cousins, everybody who have said their whole life, I've never known anyone in my family graduate high school or graduate college, and now they have Kevin graduating from UCLA. What does that say to all the kids behind them when not one person ever in the family has ever graduated college, but now he's graduating UCLA? It tells them that to dream big, that anything's possible. So, yes?
Just because, like, I think it's really great that I absolutely believe that these people should have the right to education, but what happens once they get that degree and then they try to get a job and they have to still, like, check that mark, I'm a felon? Like, people are still, like, are they hiring? I don't know.
It's called networking.
Well, let me tell you what Kevin Hagen did. Kevin Hagen somehow, I don't even know the connection. I don't know if you guys know the actor Hill Harper. Kevin knew Hill, and Hill, I met Hill because he wrote a book recently called Letters from an Incarcerated Brother. And we had coffee, and I said, you're an awesome actor, and you're an awesome activist, and I need you on the board of ARC. And without blinking an eye, he said, absolutely, but you gotta meet my friend Kevin Hagen, because he spent some time in prison. He's the most remarkable person you'll ever meet. And I called Kevin, and we met, and I introduced him to the team at ARC, and they introduced him to a company that was hiring drivers, and rather than starting out at the $8 an hour minimum wage job, he got the $14 an hour job, and I know this is only the beginning.
Yeah.
So the felony barrier is there, and it is real, and there was a bill last year in the legislature which passed to ban the felony box in terms of state government jobs. You can't go and tell Target what to do. They can do whatever they want to do. You can't force businesses to do it. But in government, why do you have the damn felony box if you're the government?
But they're still going to run a background check and then.
Yes, so what the bill basically said was they cannot ask you up front. That they can bring you in and interview you, create the human connection first, and then they run it. But they run it having already met you. And it gives you, hypothetically, a much better chance of retaining the job since you've had an interview and it isn't just this, not even letting you get in the door.
I was going to say two things you can immediately do with that. Obviously, the ballot initiative, you could vote for that. But our mayor, Eric Garcetti, is about to introduce the most progressive fair employment and housing ordinance that bans the box in the city of LA, which would make us the largest city to do such an ordinance. Like San Francisco has done it, but we're quadruple the size of San Francisco. So one thing you could do when that's introduced in June, you could tell whoever your city council member is that you're strongly in favor of this. So then on the municipal level, then we'll ban the box. Then on the statewide level, we'll ban the box in November, and so we'll start chipping away at this system.
So I wanted to thank you guys so much for being here and being a part of this, and I think maybe I'd like to give Julio and Kevin just 30 seconds each for any final comments, anything you want to share before we head home.
If I could just add to answer your question a little bit more. I think you can't really stifle the human spirit. A good friend of mine, a kid that I actually tutored, told me that I'm gonna be an engineer when I get out. I'm like, yeah, well, why not? You're getting out, why not? And I tutored him, and he ended up getting out of prison. He went to Loyola Marymount. He became a civil engineer. He's a felon. He's making excellent money, and now he's running for state assembly. So his name's Prophet Walker. His name's Prophet Walker. You may have heard of him, but he was that kid that told me, I want to be an engineer. And I'm like, damn, but you're in prison. But you know what? I didn't doubt it. So he's a felon, and his spirit is indomitable. His strength, his desire. I believe if you want it, you go after it, you get it. And to hell with my felony. I have to eat, and I'm not just gonna roll over and die.
My grandmother used to always tell me, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. And it took me many years to figure out what, Grandma, what are you talking about? Kevin, if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready. So my thing is, especially with you, young men and women, success starts with you. Pursue your dreams. Let no one take your thunder from you. If you want to be the President of the United States, if you want to be the world's greatest doctor, dentist, or lawyer, or whatever, but whatever you do, do it with humanity, do it with humbleness, and do it with compassion in your heart. And there's always going to be people less fortunate than you. There's always going to be things like, well, why did he do that? Or why did she do that? But always look at where the person came from. What did they come from? Because a lot of us weren't born with a silver spoon in our mouth. Now, personally, myself, I grew up in a good home. I went to high school in Costa Mesa. I was the only black surfer in Orange County for many years, and body surfer.
I want to see those pictures.
and so, I grew up in LA for quite a bit of my life, but I moved to Orange County. But the thing is, I had opportunity, and I didn't take full advantage of it. So my thing is, you guys, like I said, a lot of times your parents rag on you. Say, I wish I still had my parents. Be thankful for those of you that have both of your parents. Love them, listen to them, and be successful in whatever you do. And I just thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you, guys. Good night.
Thank you all.